So my name is Donagh. I'm a geneticist here at Teagasc in Moorepark, and what we're particularly focused on of late is use of DNA technology in animal breeding. And now there's been a paradigm shift in animal breeding in the past few years, in that previously we used pedigree information to identify the genetically elite animals. And it took us around 5 years to get a very good estimate of how good a particular bull was for use on a dairy herd. And all we were really doing was looking at the progeny of that animal and how that reflects the DNA of the bull. But with this new technology, this DNA technology, which we call genomic selection, we can actually look directly at the DNA of that bull. And because DNA is the same throughout your life, we can take a hair sample, which holds some DNA, and we can look at the DNA of that bull at just a few days of age, and from that get a good estimate of how good its progeny will perform in subsequent years. So how good it'll milk, what their fertility will be like, etc. Now, we launched this in 2009 in Ireland, and we were the second country in the world to do that. And since then, there's been a huge uptake of this technology by Irish dairy farmers. So much so that last year, 54% of the semen sold in Ireland was to these genomically selected bulls, which are selected based on their DNA profile. The cost of technology is a bit too high for individual farmers to use it. So what we developed last year, and we were the first country in the world to develop this at a national level, was a new small DNA chip, which we call the International Dairy Beef Chip. It's less than half the price of the other chip, and it's just as informative. It's around 98 to 99% as accurate. As well as allowing us to do this breeding using DNA, it also allows us to check for parentage and to check for lethal genes or congenital defects that are in the animals. We really launched it at the start of this year, and to date there's 12,000 of these have already been sold to dairy and beef farmers, and there's a further 13,000 committed. So we expect that we'll have used 25,000 of these new chips developed here in Ireland by the ICBF and Teagasc, and they'll be used in the year 2013. So this is what we call the Snip Chip itself, and what you have is you have a platform that has all of these little pieces of DNA. And you take an individual bull's DNA, be it from a hair sample or a semen sample or a blood sample, and you wash it over this chip, and it'll tell you exactly what DNA that particular bull is. We know what each of these pieces of DNA does, and therefore we can, based on the DNA profile of the bull from this chip, we can determine how good that bull is going to be. The chip itself is developed by a commercial company in the US, but what pieces of DNA to put on the chip we developed here in Teagasc in collaboration with the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation in Ireland. So it's a specific chip developed in Ireland, but it's actually pretty useful across the world. It's for dairy and beef, and it's the only chip that can do that. So the farmer, all he has to do is take a few hair follicles. If you're familiar with the likes of CSI, where they're looking for the perpetrator of a murder, and he leaves a hair or some blood behind him, there's DNA in all of those samples. So it's exactly the same in cattle. You just take a few hair samples, send them to a laboratory, and they will tell you the DNA profile of the animal, and then the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation will tell you how good that bull will be for milk production, fertility, etc. The benefits is simply a 50% increase in genetic gain. So currently we're increasing genetic gain at around €8 per year. That's worth around €8 million to the Irish dairy industry. This will increase it by a further 4, 50% on top of that 5. So it's worth €4 million to the Irish dairy industry. That's cumulative and permanent. So it's €4 million this year, it's €8 million a year after, €12 million a year after.